Rachel Smith is a nurse practitioner with a career in medicine spanning over the last decade and a half. As a nurse practitioner, she has experience in cardiology, cardiac surgery, structural heart, nephrology, and primary care. Over the course of her career, she has experienced being an RN and a nurse practitioner and has seen medicine change in many ways. I am so excited to share with you all today about Rachel's story of and becoming a nurse practitioner and how she has seen the medical world shift. But before we get started, I wanted to share about some exciting news. Many of you know I would title myself as a holistic RN, although I don't have the credentials behind my name for holistic. But I do have the RN. I see the value in leading a healthy, holistic, non-toxic lifestyle, and many of you know I enjoy educating you all and the public about doing the same. And I now have an easier way of doing that. Just this week, I now have an Amazon storefront where you can see some of my favorite non-toxic and holistic lifestyle products. These items are categorized into lists, making it easier for you to find what you are interested in, and there are categories from non-toxic sunscreens for kids and adults, non-toxic drinkware, book recommendations for infertility and pregnancy, to even reviews of products. So make sure to go check out my storefront after you finish watching this video with Rachel Smith. But with all of that being said, let's get into today's video, and thank you, Rachel, for coming on today. Coming on my channel today and sharing all about your experience of being and becoming a nurse practitioner. So I've already done your whole intro. My viewers know a little bit about you. But let's get into the first question. Why did you want to further your degree in nursing?
Well, honestly, it started because I was a preceptor for senior practicum students for several years in my career. And the faculty oversight kept telling me, you need to go back to school. We need you to teach. You need to go back to school. We need you to teach because you're doing such a great job with our students. And so that was 2 or 3 years of them hounding me. And then I realized God was actually asking me to do that. I did not have the best experience in my undergraduate degree, and I didn't kind of really want to go back and do that again. And after a while of kicking and screaming and telling the Lord, no, I don't want to do that, I finally gave in and said, okay, Lord, I'll do it. I'll do what you're leading me to do. And that left me with 6 weeks to finish all the prerequisites for NP school. And I am telling you, God worked a miracle because it just went bam, 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 bam. I had to have faculty recommendations. I had to have professional recommendations. I was working in CVSU at the time. I had been a cardiovascular cardiothoracic nurse for 5 years. I think it was at 3.5 at that point. And I went to our head surgeon one day, sitting in the doctor's room, and was just like, I'm looking at going back to school, and he goes, I'll write you a letter of recommendation. I couldn't even get the question out. And I went, thank you, sir. Our head CT surgeon. I had everything I needed minus one class from my undergraduate degree. I had to get all the official transcripts, which if you know anything about working in universities, that is not fast.
No,
got them within a period. And was enrolled in a summer class to get the one prerequisite I was missing, which they had to see that I was enrolled before they would let me come interview. So I'm telling you, God just went bam, 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 bam.
That's exactly right.
I interviewed for the school. I was almost done with that last class. I was literally taking night class while I was still working full time. And it was a math class. My undergrad had required one thing, but they wanted a different one for the graduate degree. And I went and interviewed for the school, and they didn't take everybody who interviewed, but I was one of the ones they accepted pending my passing that class, which I did.
Okay.
And so come that fall, I went back to NP school. And one of the things I would tell your viewers of anybody who's looking at going on to further your degree, get at least a year of experience before you go back to school.
Mm.
because when we started school, I kind of had my inner panic attack with the amount of the class load that we had. And then I kind of smacked
Oh.
myself around for a second and went, you've already done this once before. You can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
But there was so much that they expected you to already know that it wasn't enough to have just finished nursing school, passed your NCLEX. You needed some real life experience and some of that applying that critical thinking, because they were already counting on you having some of that knowledge base. They were
Mm-hmm.
not going to
Mm-hmm.
re-explain it. You had to know it because they were building off of it. Period. End of story. It's harder than nursing school, as in you had to get an A or a B or you were kicked out of the program and you got one chance at it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. If you got a C, you failed.
I did not know that
Yeah.
about NP school. And do you think,
Yeah.
is that specific to the NP school that you went to, or is that
Not from what
across
I've
the
heard.
board?
Not from what I've heard. Now, I don't know if some of the
Wow.
online schools are that way or not, like Walden and some of them,
Okay.
I don't know. But for the in-person schools that I have talked to other graduates from, yeah, you have to get a B or higher or you're kicked out.
Wow. Okay, I want to rewind real quick. There was so much,
Okay.
you have so much information that I've never heard of. So let me rewind. When you say you had an interview for NP school,
Hmm.
what does that look like? I actually did not know you had to do that.
And I don't know if all schools are that way. I interviewed for the
Okay.
Medical College of Georgia.
Okay.
So, huge med school, PT, NP, PA, all of the health sciences have degree programs there. Um, and they had a satellite branch in the town in which I was living at the time, which allowed me to continue working and go to school. I would not recommend trying to do that full time because school itself is full time. I went part time real
Mm-hmm.
fast. But I got into the hybrid program. So a lot of it was online and only part of it in person, which
Oh,
did allow me to work. And because a
okay.
lot of our professors were still practicing NPs, quite a few of our like online, you have to be present for the class or for the content review was actually at night after most of us were either walking off our shift or home from
Mm-hmm.
our shift or something like that because the professors were still practicing NPs.
Oh, yes.
So,
Okay.
so
This was
for
prior to marriage, right?
yes, thank
Okay.
God.
Yes.
Thank God. I have said many, many times, thank goodness I did this before marriage and kids because
Yes.
I don't know that I would pull it off now.
Mm-hmm.
Just too many other requirements on my time and schedule.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
was I was a single working female, and that was the majority of my needs at the time, and helping with my elderly grandmother's son. Like that was it.
Yeah.
So, actually, not related to this, I was working two careers at the time. So, yeah, I was also a music teacher. So I was also teaching music one day a week for several students. So,
I
I,
did not know that about you,
yeah,
Rachel.
yeah, I hung up that shingle in 2018,
Okay.
but I had taught for over a decade while I was also nursing, going
I
through
had
NP school
no
and nursing
idea.
school and nursing. Yeah. So I did that until right before I got married. My last student graduated, got married, and I said, I'm not taking any more students right now. My whole life's getting ready to change. Um, I'm pretty sure this guy is the guy, and we're probably going to be getting married soon. And I said, I'm not taking any more students now. So I haven't
That
done
was
much with
smart.
that since then. And it was. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you're working 50, 60 hours a week as an NP and then still teaching one day a week as well.
That's a lot.
It was a lot. But
That
I
is
didn't
so
want to give
much.
up the students I had at the time, so I just didn't take any
Yeah.
more. So I didn't get myself back in that situation.
Oh,
Okay, so back to the medical college. Um, I got to interview at my satellite branch, and what that looks
okay.
like was you walk in, and there's a chair on this side of the table, and there is a panel of professors on the other side of the table, and they went over our previous education, our career so far, what we wanted out of it, golly, that was over a decade ago. I'm trying to remember all the questions they asked. Um, and it was a pretty rigorous interview. I think I've really only been in one that was more intense than that. And that was my
Would
interview.
you, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
would you say when you were in that interview and they asked what you wanted out of it, would you say you felt pressured to say like you wanted to work at a certain hospital or you wanted to do a certain kind of NP or
No,
become
I
a certain kind of
didn't,
NP?
because at the time my goal was to do medical missions.
Okay.
So we had, where I grew up and was working at the time, we had two major hospitals in that town.
Mm-hmm.
So I had options, and with our licenses, you can go pretty much anywhere in the state, and then you can apply for
Mm-hmm.
multiple other licenses. So it's a little different as an NP than it is as an RN. Like as an RN living in the Southeast, I could get a tri-state license or a five-state
Mm-hmm.
license or a multi-state license. As an NP, you have to apply for each license individually, submit your CMEs every year to each one individually. It is, you don't get a package deal on that anymore.
Okay. There's no non-compact or compact license like there is for
Nope.
RNs.
Nope. I looked
Interesting.
at that
Okay.
because I had looked at doing some telemedicine positions while
Yeah.
some different things had changed in my life. And a lot of the telemed positions want you to have a multiple licenses. So I looked into it at the time. It's not available for NPs like it is for RNs.
That's a lot of work because every state requires a different amount of CEUs. You're
Yep.
renewing on
Yep.
different years and you have to pay to renew. That's a lot.
Everything. Yeah. And as an NP, you have to keep your RN license active and your NP license active. So before I can renew my NP license, I have to renew my RN license with the Board of Nursing before they will let me even click on the NP license. So I have to
Really?
pay and keep all licenses active, my certification license active, my DEA license active, and by certification, I mean AANP, APRN, whatever certifying body you went through for your initials after your name. And then if you have specialty certifications, you also have to do those. So like I'm a member of the American College of Cardiology.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pay that fee every year as well. And I'll give you an example. Like if you carry your own malpractice insurance and not just
Yeah.
did it through your employer. When I was an RN, I did carry mine because I worked in a high stress, high
Mm-hmm.
knowledge field because we were getting open hearts 12 to 18 hours after bypass or valve surgery. We were getting lungs straight out of the OR sometimes. We were getting vascular repair, TVAR, EVAR, amputations, FEM pops, etc., straight out of PACU many times,
Mm-hmm.
etc. So it high stress, high knowledge base.
Yes.
And my RN malpractice insurance was $109 a year.
Okay. And that's just for malpractice.
That, well, and I'll give you an example. Working part time as an NP, my malpractice insurance is over $800 a year.
No.
Yes, ma'am.
No way.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
what? So it's based, so it would be higher if you were working full time.
When I was working full time, it was about $1,100 a year, and I am not in a high cost field.
No.
Yeah, if you're in dermatology, OB, those are the top two. You will pay through the roof for malpractice insurance if you're carrying your own
Dermatology.
because it's how people look. If you screw up somebody's looks, they will sue the pants off you. If you
Oh,
ruin somebody's
the
kid,
aesthetics.
the aesthetics of it. OB, mother baby,
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, that
Because it's two
both of those are
lives.
high risk. Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
And people are protective of their kids as they should be, right?
Of course. Yes.
So
Wow.
your fees depend on which specialty you are in and how much you're working. And then that is with discounts for having certain certifications that I carry.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So you earn a lot more and you pay a lot more. The
Wow. Okay.
difference is as an RN, you need to know your pathophys, you need to know your math, you need to know your dosing, you need to know all the things to catch the errors, you need to know how to assess your
Mm-hmm.
patients and see what's going on. I could tell you some stories when I was on CVSU. Um, I
I
had
could tell you some from travel nursing.
Oh, I am sure you could. I am sure you could. I'll give you one example. I had a post-op patient, had come back in, was having some chest pain. We were watching them. No, sorry, wasn't having chest pain. They were having a very small mid-sternal infection that we had put a wound back on.
Okay.
And I'm working a weekend, and this patient's complaining of chest pain, but it's very atypical. It's not mid-sternal. It's not that crushing chest pain. It's not, acute coronary syndrome kind of symptoms. They're talking about it in a completely different part of their chest. And their labs looked good, minus one that went off because the doctor gave them the wrong drug. But their labs looked good. Their x-ray looked good. None of their diagnostics that had been ordered, I could put their finger on. And when the chief surgeon came around that weekend, I grabbed and I said, I cannot tell you what's wrong with this patient, but my gut is telling me this patient's going to crash if we don't figure out what's going on with this patient.
Mm-hmm.
Something is really wrong. I had worked with him long enough. He trusted my gut.
Mm-hmm.
And he went in and assessed the patient and started assessing the wound, and all of her mid-sternal sutures popped. And she started pouring pus out of her chest. And that was one of those moments where you put on your nurse face and you do not show what is going on inside you, because my jaw hit the floor in my mind.
Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, family, this is what's going on.
Thank goodness family was not there right then.
Oh, good.
And he was like, I need this. And the charge nurse and I are just sitting there handing him stuff. And in my brain, I'm going, what the heck?
Yep. And you're just like, total straight face.
Total straight face. We're fine.
Just
we're
explaining.
Good. He was amazing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we pumped that patient full of antibiotics, and he closed her chest again later, and, all like that. But I was like, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just that I had worked long enough in the field that nursing gut was telling me, red light, something is going on. Something's wrong with this patient.
And going back to what you said you should have at least 1 year of experience before going to NP school. Could you imagine if you were the NP rounding in that situation and you had no bedside experience?
Right. I have dealt with crashing patients. I have dealt with codes. I have done stuff like that. I've had patients. I had one patient who was discharged, paperwork signed. We pulled the IV out. They coded on the way out the door. Like literally, we put this patient back in the bed and are coding them as they're supposed to be going downstairs.
Yeah.
I had a patient, never seen it before, found out it's far more common because we use amiodarone all the time in cardiology.
Of course.
But one of the big side effects with amiodarone is prolonged QT interval. And some people are very allergic to it. There's a lot more side effects that we don't normally talk about. But I had a patient, it was actually one of the fellow nurses' patients. I ended up working with them.
And is this when you were a bedside or NP? Okay.
Bedside nursing. She had just accepted this patient out of the ICU. They were in AFib. It was the order to hang amio to try to convert them and all. Hangs amio. And before she can get out of the room, this patient codes. Like, bam, in the bed, codes. We work them. Cardiologist comes in. We work them, get them back to the ICU. Everything's been stopped. We're pushing ACLS meds. And then when they get back into the ICU, they try to hang it again. He codes again. And we realize that this is
it's the amio.
It's the amio.
Yeah.
So having those kinds of experiences really has served me well, because I fell in love with cardiology when I was a senior practicum student. I was working ER. I was seeing everything in the world come in. And I remember sitting at the desk one day going, I just wish another heart would come in. And I went, ding, that's what I need to do.
Huh.
And so I've done a lot. I've done cardio. I've done primary care. I've done nephrology. I've done private home care. And I keep coming back to cardiology. In the field of cardiology, as an NP, I have done structural heart. I have done general cardiology. I have done heart failure, and I've done cardiac and vascular.
That was going to be one of my questions, was when you were in NP school, did you know you wanted to go into cardiology?
I wasn't sure. So my degree is actually as an FNP. I didn't do the adult, the acute care and all, because at the time my
FNP.
focus was I want to do medical missions.
Okay.
So I
Tell me
want to
what
be able,
FNP stands for.
family nurse practitioner.
Yes, thank you. Okay. I was
So
like,
I am
tell me again.
trained, yeah, I am trained from cradle to grave.
Okay.
Based on my
Okay.
certifications, I am trained from cradle to grave.
Okay.
Now, I've done that for like a year of my career because I fell in love with hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I first came out of NP school, I got an offer for oncology out of one of my clinical sites, and I got an offer for structural heart. So when I graduated NP school, this is over a decade ago. It's hard to think about. It's been over a decade.
Yeah.
I had recently heard at one of our continuing ed conferences about TAVR. TAVR was just coming off of trials into the real world at the time. And one of our cardiologists who was fairly new to the area had trained on it at Wake Forest. So he did
Okay.
this whole special presentation on what TAVR is and what they do with it and so on and so forth. And I remember being on the edge of my seat with my eyes glued to that screen. That was just the coolest thing I had ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm graduating in P school, they're getting ready to open a TAVR unit at the hospital of my employment. And I went and applied. Had
Mm-hmm.
not passed my boards yet. And that was the hardest
You're
interview
like,
I've
I
ever been
want
in.
this.
I did. I wanted
Yeah.
it. That was the hardest interview I've ever been in. I walked into about
Okay.
15 people around a board table just waiting for me.
Wow.
And I was at the head of the boardroom table, and they were all firing questions at me. And the very surgeon who had signed a letter for me to go to NP school was the hardest one on me in that interview.
Wow.
Yeah,
Isn't
so there
that
were
funny?
surgeons, there were interventional cardiologists, there were administrators, there were nurses for the cardiac program, there were, I don't even remember who all was in there, cath lab folks, and they
Mm-hmm.
drilled me.
Like, what were they like questions as far as like,
They wanted to know my experience, what I was willing to put
okay.
into it. Had I ever done research? To what had I done my research on in NP school? Like what my focus was, like I was in that interview for like an hour. I don't even remember everything they asked me.
What did they ask you like scenario based questions?
I don't think so because
Okay.
this program was new. There
Okay.
was nobody in
Mm-hmm.
it yet. They were looking for somebody to be the NP and valve clinic coordinator to build this program, to work alongside the surgeons, the interventional
Wow.
cardiologists, the imaging cardiologists. So it's a multidisciplinary team, and that's why they had so
Mm-hmm.
many disciplines at the table. Because you have to work out of OR, out of cath lab, surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
interventionalist, imaging, so on and so forth. Like literally, the job they were hiring me for was to be the hub of like 12 different disciplines,
Wow.
as well as
That's
the
a
direct
lot.
liaison to the patient.
Oh,
So
okay.
I walked out of there feeling wrung out,
Yes.
but somewhat confident too. But just like whether I get it or not, I think I did okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a call from the CNO about a week later and says that I was the only candidate that they were 100% unanimous on. And my jaw hit the table
Oh,
because you don't get that many disciplines and doctors together and them all agree on
no.
everything, right?
No, that's right. Never.
So,
Never.
so I took the job. And when I walked in, they gave me a room, a desk, a dry board, a file cabinet, and a chair and said, okay, build the program. I had to learn the business side. I had to read the journals. I had to learn the skills along with the doctors, not the actual implant, but enough to teach the patients to know what they were looking for. I had to learn to do
Mm-hmm.
3D CT scan reconstruction, like all the stuff I had asked my professors for. Hey, can you teach us about reading images and so on? Oh, you won't need to
Mm-hmm.
do that. The physicians do that. Yeah. Well, guess who was pulling the CT images and the echo images at 6 o'clock the night before the patient meeting? Right? Like I had to learn it on the fly.
That's a lot. That is a
Yeah.
lot. And that was going to be one of my questions, which I feel like you've already answered this, or two of my questions, really. Um, I'll ask this one first. So, as a nurse, right, as a
Mm-hmm.
bedside nurse or working in a clinic, whatever, whichever, you are working in the multidisciplinary team like you had just
Yes.
talked about.
Yes.
What would you say is the biggest which I already can see what your answer was be in your experience here, but what would you say, like emotionally, the biggest mindset shift would be going from an RN to an NP?
That's a great question. And this is one I've told multiple RNs about who've talked about maybe going back to grad school. The biggest and hardest shift, even after you take your boards, is you go from an order taker and the middleman between the patient advocate, etc., to the diagnostician and prescription writer.
Mm-hmm. That's
You're
a
not the
heavy
order
weight on your
taker
shoulders.
anymore. You now, if you're working with a good team, then the doctor should be available for questions at least for the first couple months.
Okay.
And a lot of that depends solely on the doctor. I have doctors who are like, you're my mid-level and you're going to run everything through me.
Okay.
You're just my extra hands. You're my extender. That's it. I have worked with doctors who are like, you know your stuff. Call me when you have questions. And I know of doctors who are like, you should know this already. You've been through school. Only call me if there's an emergency. Figure out the rest. So,
Really?
oh yes, yes. There's some in the town in which I work that are like that. Do not call me unless it's an
Oh,
emergency. Figure it out.
that's
So,
kind of scary.
it is kind of scary. It is,
Like, I
and
would be
that's why
scared.
our malpractice is a whole heck of a lot higher too, because now we have the
There we
power of the
go.
pen. Now we have the
Yeah.
power of that prescription pad. You've got to know those meds. You've got to know the risks. You've got to look at the interactions. And it's not just looking at the patient going, what am I going to give on that EMR? Or, maybe I need to hold this because of whatever. It's looking at it and going, does this patient have what they need? Are they allergic to any of those things? What can I give them based on their allergies? Are they optimized for their position? Okay, this patient came in CHF for the third time this month. Why do they keep coming in? I actually just had this a couple months ago. This patient kept coming in, kept saying that they had been discharged on the wrong diuretic. And I was like the third time I personally had seen this patient in a couple months. And I start digging back through the records and realize that somebody had not taken the time on the discharge summary to figure out that they kept putting the patient on the diuretic that did not work for them instead of the diuretic that had been prescribed for the patient. And they kept having CHF overload. And I'm talking coming in 10 and 20 pounds over. Yeah,
Oh,
not being able to breathe, on oxygen, pulling off pounds and pounds and pounds of fluid. And I ended up
oh.
calling the intensivist going, I don't know who, like sitting down with one of the intensivists and they're going, okay, what idiot keeps putting this patient on it? So we had to flag the chart, put it basically on an allergy list, a no give
Yep. Put
list,
it on the allergy list. Yep.
because it does not work for this patient. They were in 3 times in a month for CHF overload on diuretics because it was the wrong diuretics.
Do
And
you
this is just
think,
a couple months ago.
I feel like I see stuff like this happen, or I'm away from bedside currently in like private duty, but
Yeah.
even with private duty, I can see like just
You have to know your stuff.
it's just like, really, like, come on, people, like, you have to have a
Well,
good medication record for your patient. Do you think a lot of that has to do with like workload of the doctors or the nurses? Do you think some of it could be like pure laziness?
let me give you an example of how things have changed in my over 15 years.
Okay.
And it's a kind of becoming a pet peeve of mine because I'm seeing it become more and more and more of an issue. When I was in RN school, we were still on paper charts and
Yeah.
doing some on the computer. Okay. About that time, the conversation started shifting from use critical thinking, learn what you've done in school, follow your Hippocratic or Nightingale oath, take care of your patients, the patients come first, right? Just
That's right.
chart what you've done so that there's a record of it.
That's right.
2, evidence-based practice. Evidence-based practice sounds really good, and who wouldn't want to be able to back up with the science what you're doing, right? The problem comes in when you realize that somebody controls what's published. Whether or not the science is there or not, somebody controls
Can you
what's
just
published.
Can you just like preach that a little bit louder, Rachel? Because I
Okay,
feel like people
let me
do
tell
not
you.
understand this point. If you are a
Okay,
brand new nurse, you do not know this. And when you're a
right,
nurse
right.
who is seasoned, you see this 100% over the years. And I am so happy you just said that.
All right, so I will give you a
Oh,
prime example. Um, and I see this in my clinical practice too, and it just makes me like, with some of the people because we are not taking care of our patients and we are not equipping our patients. And here's
mm-hmm.
why. When you look at most of the medical journals, you will find that it comes to a conclusion of a pharmaceutical or an industry outcome. What are the number one things that lead to disease, particularly in this country as a first world country? Diet and lifestyle.
That's right. That is right.
But we don't teach diet and lifestyle. We teach take this
Nope.
med.
That's
And you will not
right.
find a lot except in certain scientific journals. You won't see it much in JAMA. You won't see it much in BMJ. You won't see it much in Lancet. You won't see it much in the primary ones. And here's why. The pharmaceutical company pays for the publications.
Yep.
And they
Preach it
control the
louder.
editing board. So when they are the ones controlling it, then their interest is to make sure they sell a product or a robotic or an implant or something.
Comes down to the
But we're
money.
not taking care of our patients. I have patients.
Is right.
Let me put it this way. My eyebrows goes up when I have a patient come in a normal BMI.
Mm-hmm. And it's like,
because
what?
I see 30 to 70 something as a BMI.
Which is
Yes.
obese.
Yes. It is morbidly obese.
Or morbidly, yeah.
In the 60 to 70 BMI range. Okay, overweight is 25.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't get into the whole BMI is not an accurate demonstrator, but in these patients,
Yeah.
they are obese, okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Some of them cannot walk right anymore because their body cannot handle the pressure of what they are carrying.
That's
Now,
right.
these are the same patients that I cannot get to understand how to properly eat. And when I'm expected to see 4 patients an hour, I don't have time to teach them that.
Mm-hmm.
I got into NP school because I wanted to be able to teach people how to change their life. The way American medicine has gone, it is no longer about teaching and equipping the patient to take care of themselves, to build their health, and then to just use the pharmaceuticals or whatever when they have to have it.
When needed, yes.
So, for instance, when I got Lyme disease in the past, you need to treat it or you will have some very severe long-term effects. Okay, yeah, that's a need, all right? You get in a massive motor vehicle accident, yeah, I'm glad there's a good trauma surgeon standing by. There is a place for that.
That's right. That's right. Amen.
But we are harming our patients by not teaching them the risks, not giving them proper informed consent, not giving them alternative options, not teaching nutrition. And the other side of it is the food industry has bought out the other side of the regulators so they can put toxins, carcinogens, seed oils, and everything else in there and still sell it as health food because it's all about a branding or a label. That's right. So the difference now in the last 2 to 4 years, the language has changed again to guideline-directed medical therapy. So no longer
I have not heard this yet.
Oh yeah, this has been like within the last 2 years, I think. No longer is it about critically thinking and assessing your patients and giving them what they need and teaching them how to do it. Now it is a board of some kind has said, we've looked at all of the data and this is the guidelines we've put out. And as long as you follow the guidelines, your license will not be at risk.
This is bringing us back to 2020.
Yes, it came after 2020. So as long as you are a good little soldier and you follow orders and you stay in the box and you can check the box, it doesn't matter if the patient dies at the end, as long as you said that I followed the guidelines and then the patient expired, you are still covered.
You know what's so wrong about all of that is that is not how doctors have been. That is not how medicine has advanced in the years because people stepped out of the box. They were able to think out of the box and come
Yes.
up with different treatments and not, okay, yes, maybe some people were like banned, like homeopathic medicine. Like, you're banned, you can't be a doctor here anymore, or you're not in this organization
And
anymore.
the very reason we
But
wash hands, the very
yes,
reason we wash hands
exactly.
is because a doctor made the connection between going from autopsies of diseased bodies to delivering babies, and the
Yes.
mothers and
Yep.
babies were dying.
Yep. And
And
then
guess
it goes
what? They
down.
ran him out on a rail and he died in
Yes.
poverty. And what is the number one thing that is preached from nursing school on? Wash your hands.
Your
What do we
hands.
do as
Yep.
good mothers? Wash your hands
That's right.
because
And it's
of
like,
he
if
put the
you,
connection together.
yes, and if you have these guidelines and you don't veer out of them, okay, you might be covered. But are we ever even going to make any
But where
medical
does the
advancements
ethics come
now?
in? Where
Yeah.
does the ethics come in at this point? Because they're shutting down all of the people who are actually doing the research, looking outside the box, trying to take care of their
Mm-hmm.
patients, and taking their licenses to
Mm-hmm.
practice and leaving the people who are good little soldiers in place. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know they don't even, many medical schools no longer even require the Hippocratic Oath of physicians on graduation now, as of about 3 years ago?
Really?
Yes.
I wonder if even nursing schools have to do the Nightingale Pledge. We
You know
had
what?
to.
We didn't. Our school did not have to, but I was the co-president of my nursing school, and my co-president and I said we will do this, and we are
That's
setting this
right.
up for all future classes to do this. We had a Nightingale lamp. We made them all.
Yep.
We all had to take the Nightingale Pledge and all, because that is the bottom line ethics of our profession. I
My
love
candle's
it.
broken. But
I
yes, this is
love it.
from
Yes.
2013 when I graduated. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. That's when I
Mm-hmm.
graduated in P school.
Yeah. Oh, no, I didn't graduate in
So
2013. What am I saying? That's when I started. I graduated in
okay,
2016.
gotcha, gotcha. I graduated in 2013 for MP
Okay.
school. Um, so yeah, that's where we're hitting this big thing of the ethical issue. And a lot of people in the profession are going, can I even do this profession anymore? Because I'm not just
Mm-hmm.
going to check the boxes. Okay. When I was
That's
in
right.
nursing school, it was you take care of your patients, you make some notes, you take care of your patients, you assess your patients, your focus is your patients. When Obamacare hit, now we don't
Mm-hmm.
get paid unless we check boxes. That evidence-based medicine started it. The Affordable Care Act, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, came in, and now it was about checking boxes so a bureaucrat in a cubicle somewhere else could say whether or not you got paid
Mm.
instead of just
I
getting
didn't know
paid for the
that.
care you had given the patient. I've watched all of this happen and unfold in my career, and I
Mm.
watched how our continuing ed classes started shifting from more patient care to evidence care to ICD-9 to ICD-10 code care to now guidelines.
Huh.
And that's just in the last 15 or 17 years.
What do you think is pushing this?
Oh, that's easy. That's easy. There are certain people with a particular outcome that they desire
Mm-hmm.
who have a lot of power and control over the medical community,
Mm-hmm.
the publications, the medical
Oh, yeah.
schools,
Yeah.
etc. So I'll give you part of the history of it for your viewers. About 110 years ago, Rockefeller. Um,
Oh, this is good.
you know
Yep.
this story? Do
Mm-hmm.
you know this
Yep.
story?
But
Um,
bring it out to my channel.
okay, so Rockefeller, of course, was an oil mogul. And he was one of the men who was very involved on the financial side of trying to take over nations. If you don't know anything about it, look up the foundation of the Federal Reserve and start digging from there. Um, Vanderbilt was involved in that and all. But Rockefeller wanted major family control over multiple areas of the world. And it wasn't enough to be an oil mogul. He realized that pharmaceuticals could be made of petroleum byproducts, which meant that his oil got used for a lot more things. The very fact that we use petroleum bases for Neosporin to other
Vaseline.
medication, Vaseline,
You can
etc., it is
smell
an
it.
oil-based derivative.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, now I'm a medical historian as well. I teach 19th century medicine and surgery. And so going back to prior to the 1910s, we have everything from mercury-based medicines. Thank God we got away from that.
Yes,
For
yes.
the most part.
Because somebody thought outside of the box that
I
this is
have
wrong.
medical diaries from the war between the states where a young surgeon went to the military to serve, and one of his mentors had told him to try to that the blue pill, blue mass, which was literally blue because of the mercury in it, was one of the number one medications given. But one of his mentors said, do not be anxious to give it because this might actually be doing harm. We need to watch this closer. And by the end of it, they had quit giving blue mass as much, or calomel, or some of the other ones, because they were heavy metal medications that were literally poisoning people, right? But the other side of it was herbal medicine. Herbs, wild garlic, honey, mustard poultices, kaolin poultices, so on and so forth. And so you're not going to be anxious to change from that, where you can literally mix the medication yourself and give it to the patient, to something where you have to rely on it being created and sent to you. If you're of that mindset. So what Rockefeller did was he hired a man named Flexner to publish the Flexner report that basically said naturopathic medicine is a quack, it is a kookery, people are dying because of it, you need to use these pharmaceuticals. He bought Harvard, he bought multiple medical schools across the country and said, I will pay for all of your expenses if you teach my curriculum. The professors and the older doctors who were watching it and starting saying, people are sicker, they are dying, these pharmaceuticals are toxic, we've got to do that. He had them stripped of their licenses and run out of business. Had all of that curriculum taken out of the medical school's textbooks and only pharmacology taught from then on. Now, guess what? We have antibiotics that don't work. We have superbugs that are resistant, where they're not going to make any more antibiotics because it's going to mutate again and again before they can ever get one through trials and to market. And guess
I've had plenty of patients with that superbug, and you only can be with that patient one-on-one all day because no antibiotics. That's right.
Yeah. So guess what's killing those bugs?
Probably
the medications we were using in the 19th century. But do the doctors know about it? No. The naturopaths know about it. The medical historians know about it. The clinical herbalists know about it, but not the main doctors. And it's the
not
same
the ones that the majority of Americans see.
Yeah. They tried to shut up Lister. They tried to shut up Pasteur. They tried to shut up
Hahnemann.
Yes, they tried to shut up I can't think of his name right now, the one who taught hand washing. And now they go to Rockefeller, shutting up the old, very experienced physicians who knew how to do all of this, so that it would just be that. So now that financial pressure, ever since the 1910s, has been in medicine. Oh, and when they found out that his medications were causing cancer, he founded the American Cancer Society as a philanthropist to look for the cure for cancer as a cover-up for the fact that his product was causing cancer. It's all out there. You can easily
I know it is.
It
it is with the food industry and all. Yep.
Yes, food industry, etc. I mean, Bayer Monsanto is one of several companies that help provide the poison for the Nazi concentration camps. Bayer. We say Bayer. In German, it's Bayer. Yeah. They are one of many companies that help provide that. So when people are like, oh, they would never do anything to harm us, what does their history say? It ultimately comes down to the bottom line. So the hard part of being in medicine right now is, did you take that oath? What does that oath mean to you? How do you best take care of your patients and still be able to work in the field? If the patient's volume overloaded, you better believe it, I'm going to give them a diuretic. All right.
Yeah.
If they've got RVR, you better believe I'm going to slow down that rhythm,
Of course.
But
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, that's what that patient needs.
Yes.
But
Mm-hmm.
is the pharmaceutical the only option? Do they know the risk of that pharmaceutical? Do you have long enough to tell them? And that is a lot of what each practitioner has to decide at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I back myself up with charts that I have to catch up on at the end of the day to take those extra few minutes to teach the patients at least one thing per appointment
Mm-hmm.
to try to shift that arrow back
Yeah.
some.
Yeah.
And I'm often buried at charts at the end of the day because I'm have to balance that, how late can I get home to my kids,
Mm-hmm.
and how am I going to take care of my patients well? Do I skip over all of this, or do I
Mm-hmm.
take those extra 2 or 3 minutes to teach them one thing this visit and one thing next visit, etc.
Mm-hmm.
When my nurse's heart wants to sit down and teach them, just like we do with our diabetics, how do you store your insulin? How do you administer
That's
your
right.
insulin? Read back, tell me
Are you
back. I
holding your
want,
pen for 10 seconds? Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
all of those things that I still
Mm-hmm.
want to do. But now instead of being with one or four or five or six patients for 20, for 12 hours,
Mm-hmm.
I may be seeing 20 plus in 8.
Do you have any control over that?
That depends on the employer and usually no.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Because it's a
when I was
business.
doing it is a business. At the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, it is no longer about being a public servant. It is about a business. And
Mm-hmm.
that was part of the case when I started in the field. It ever since the Affordable Care Act, it has become far, far more, because if you don't check those boxes, you don't get paid. And they still have
Mm-hmm.
their own loans to pay back and their doors to keep open and their employees to pay.
Yeah.
So even with the stuff we've seen since 2020, a lot of docs are having to make the decision, do I jump ship and leave the guidelines and actually tell patients, hey, I was wrong, I made a mistake, here's what I've learned since then, or do they double down on it and keep the thing of the doctor knows best and keep their doors open?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of docs have to make that decision themselves. I know a lot of nurses have had to make that decision as to whether or not they were going to
Absolutely.
continue along those lines or not.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a lot of people in the field I've talked to over the last 4 or 5 years who, some of them are saying, I'm not renewing my license. I'm out. I
Mm-hmm.
can't do this anymore. This is not why I entered medicine.
That's right.
My
And I
stance has
think,
been,
sorry, I think maybe people look at, I know we're not, we're in the same generation, I think. You're a millennial.
yes.
Yeah, and we're on different sides of the millennials a little
Yes.
bit, but
Yes.
I'm on the very end of it. But I think a lot of people look at our generation and are like, they're lazy, like nurses specifically. This is what I've heard. Or even the generation after us, but they're lazy, they don't want to work hard. They like this nursing is hard. But what
It is
you're saying is
very
so
hard.
true is that this isn't the kind of nursing that we signed up for.
No,
We signed
it
up to
is not.
educate our patients. We signed up to take care of our patients,
Yes.
not just check all the boxes all day long and practice what
Yeah.
you're saying, these
When I spend more
guidelines.
time looking at the computer than I do at my patients,
That's right.
there's a problem. And
Yes.
I think it's both, honestly. There, particularly as we get more to the kids who are just hitting nursing school now, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
depends on how they were raised and the expectations.
That's very true.
Because
Yes.
I do see a lot of them who would rather sit there and write out the time and do the bare basics or be on their
Mm-hmm.
phone than working hard.
Yeah.
I'm of the
I would
generation,
agree.
and my upbringing was such. My dad was self-employed. We all had to work to make
Yeah.
the world go round for our family.
That's right.
And so I have been working since I can remember in one form or
Mm-hmm.
fashion, even if it was just doing yard work for the neighbors, just because that's what our family needed.
That's right. That's how it
So,
was for us too. If I needed to pay for dance class or if I wanted a dance costume, I needed to bake bread
yep,
and
yep,
sell it at my
did it.
mom's work.
Yep, I had
Literally.
my own
Yep.
bread baking business for a while for
Yep.
things like that, because mom and dad were keeping the lights on and the food on the table, and any extras we were paying for,
That's right.
for within reason. My grandparents helped a little bit too, but I
Yeah.
grew up from childhood knowing the benefit of hard work. I grew
Mm-hmm.
up with a biblical worldview of life is
Mm-hmm.
precious and something to be protected and taken care of. Our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, so we have a responsibility to care for
Amen.
bodies.
That's exactly right.
And that's a lot of what put me in medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've had some family members and friends in the hospital a lot recently, and it's interesting. My mother has been talking about a lot of the African doctors have been the best doctors with the
Mm-hmm.
best bedside manner and the best care,
Mm-hmm.
far superior over the American doctors that they have worked with. And I saw that with some of my family members, and even when I was bedside nursing, because while not all of the countries have the same necessary worldview,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them do.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are very family based
That's
and,
right.
elder care and so on and so forth. And so I think the worldview and the upbringing has a lot of impact into that as well.
Yeah.
Because if you value life, if you truly listen to get the rest of the picture, guys, it's not just about do you have the very basics for that H&P. Listen to your patient and they will tell you what is going on.
That's
Listen
exactly
to
right.
your patient and you will figure out what you need to do. It's not just about is their CBC elevated or is their troponin elevated. What led to that?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we've got patients and we're sitting there scratching our heads on until somebody with some brains walks into the room and starts digging deeper.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
But the hard thing is when you're expected to see, your team's been consulted on this many patients and you got two people splitting them or one person splitting them while the physician's in the cath lab or in the OR or in the interventional office or whatever else, then you start having to just make sure every patient is seen. And so we've
Mm-hmm.
become more of an assembly line, run of the mill, get them in, get them out kind of healthcare, which isn't
Mm-hmm.
healthcare.
Yeah.
It is sick care. It is check
Yep.
the box care. It is are the bureaucrats happy,
Yeah.
care instead of is this patient properly being cared for? I'll tell you a personal family member. We had a family member in the hospital a couple years ago. Did not have a good underlying health at all. Came in, we found them unresponsive in their residence, nearly dead. Got them into the hospital, started getting turned around. They were septic when we found them.
Mm.
And so they start working on them. They get antibiotics in them. They're doing better. And then their white count jumps to over 20,000. They start running a little fever. And the infectious disease doctor is trying to tell those of us who have medical power of attorney, medical decision making for them that we need to test them for COVID. They came in with GI pain and sepsis. Their white count just jumped to over 20,000. And you want to treat COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Forgive
Mm-hmm.
my very blunt Scottish German descent, but I told that infectious disease doctor to go do their job and find the blooming infection. Because
Seriously.
it
Yeah.
wasn't, you're not making us another code that gets the hospital another $30,000. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
go find the infection.
Mm-hmm.
There was
What
no
would
other
even make
symptoms
your
besides a
mind?
white count because he has a fever. Hello, a fever is also a sign of infection. You are an infectious disease doctor. Go
Yes.
do your job. I
Yeah.
literally told him that in a respectful manner. And guess what? He found the infection.
Mm-hmm. It's yeah. Yeah, it is. I I would love to be an NP one day. That is something I
Yeah.
would love to go into. But after being removed from bedside for over a year now, just over a year now, and
Yeah.
then also just seeing how my mindset has shifted
Shifted. Yeah.
over my 8 years of nursing practice,
Yeah.
there is I commend you for being in the conventional um, world of medicine still. I
Yeah.
don't think I could ever go back into anything like that. And I think like, okay, if I want to be an NP one day, I would, I feel like my heart's desire would be medical missions, of course. That's
Yeah.
something I've always wanted to go into. But of course, with a 1 year old, that is not doable. And
Not doable.
Lord
Yeah.
willing, more children in the future. But
Mhm.
functional medicine, but even some
I
of,
love some of my functional med colleagues.
yeah, even some of the functional medicine things, I'm like, I don't know. But I just don't know a lot about it because it's not talked
Hmm.
about a lot because all I've known is
So AMA
conventional
medicine.
medicine. Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm an NP who works AMA medicine, but believes there's a lot more to offer than just AMA medicine.
And that's
Um,
good to hear.
because I came into nursing already having a nutrition background.
Hmm.
And so I was the odd duck out already, even from my BSN, because
Yes,
I already had some of that other experience and background, and saying it's not just about the meds we push, it is
that's
about
right.
the nutrition and lifestyle.
Hmm.
Um, there is a lot. I'm one of those people. I never stop reading and learning,
Yeah,
whether or not it's a CME class or just on my own, because there's so much more out there than what they put in our CME classes.
hmm,
I have several colleagues and a friend who is a physician who's gone into functional medicine.
okay,
And there is a lot more to the picture. For instance, us in nursing, we don't just prescribe the insulin and walk out of the room, right?
yeah,
Does the patient know how to do it? Do they know how to properly administer it? Do they have a refrigerator to keep the insulin in? Those are
that's
the kind of
right.
things the nurses find out, right? So functional medicine is more of, all right, let's figure out what's going on. Now let's go after the actual cause of it. Let's treat it
Hmm.
nutritionally and pharmacologically. Let's
Hmm.
put you on the right supplements. Let's make sure you're actually sleeping. Do you have, sleep apnea that is causing your oxygen to drop, that's putting you on a high stress, cortisol's being released, and now your adrenals are having issues as well?
That's right.
Or are
Yeah,
we just going to throw a med at you?
that's right.
Okay. So this is more
Hmm.
how I think. I don't have a functional med certification. I have thought about doing that, but
Hmm.
with young children, that's not this season of my
Yes,
life.
that's right. That's right.
um,
Yeah.
but continuing to read, you put stuff together. All right. If I
Yeah.
can get a patient off of all of their sodas and onto water, we're making progress.
That's
If I can
right.
get a patient
Yes.
off white bread to fresh milled grains that actually have some fiber and some vitamin E and some endosperm in it, that's actually going to help their gut health, we're making
Hmm.
progress.
That's
All
right.
right.
Yeah.
I would love to have the training to deal with mold toxicity and yeast overgrowth and,
Hmm.
chronic inflammation and stuff. I'm learning. I don't
Yeah.
have that yet. But the nice thing about our field is, whether you're an RN or an NP, with that license, you can do lots of specialties and have
That's right.
lots of opportunities for growth. And that does not have to be your end point.
That's
Now,
right.
when I went to NP school, it was an MSN program. They introduced the DNP program halfway through to my degree.
Okay.
And I actually asked my professors, I said, is there any way I can bridge to the DNP program? And they were like, no, you will have to come back and do the DNP too. I said,
Ah.
forget it. I'm going to
Yeah.
end up with the same certification at the end of the day. Forget it. Unless I decide to start
Hmm.
teaching, which I have thought about. Haven't done it yet. um, But even with that, you can go get a functional med certification. You can go get
Hmm.
certifications in different things. You can become, a critical care specialist. You can become all of these different things that can be the foundational base as a stepping stone into more.
Hmm.
And I would
That's right.
encourage anybody, if you're an RN, if you're going back to NP school, if you're an NP, the bottom line needs to be that oath and that patient care. The whole reason
Hmm.
we have a job is because people are hurting and need help. They need somebody who's going to hold them, who's going to take care of them, who's going to be their advocate, and not just check a box and not just say yes, sir, but hey, this patient needs this.
That's
This
right.
patient does not want this, and we're not going to force them into it. To
That's
make sure
right.
that the patient has the proper education to make an informed consent. I don't know how many
Mm-hmm.
patients have said yes when they've been told, okay, the risk could be this, this, and this, but then when they get the paperwork, there's 24 risks on the page,
That's
and they've
right.
only been told 5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
That is not informed consent. They have to know the full risk and the full potential benefit before they say yes or no. And then, as providers and healthcare members, we have to respect their no as well.
That's right. That's exactly
And I
right.
don't see a lot of that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I have taken the stance of I'm going to continue that Nightingale oath.
That's
I'm going to
right.
continue that biblical worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to fight back from within the system and go, no. The patient said no.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
And that's
And
it,
on,
because that
on the
is the
provider's side,
pledge
that
that we
is
took.
their answer. That is the final decision. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have some patients, I just go, I need to make sure that you fully understand this. Let's go through it
Yes.
together. Here's all the risks. Here's the benefit. Here's the potential things that can happen if you say no. What do you want to do? And if they
Mm-hmm.
say no, I write out in that chart, they've been had everything explained to them. Their decision is no, we will not go any farther on this path. And that's it. The
That's
patient
right.
is the final word.
Mm-hmm.
Or the patient's family member, if it's a power of attorney thing or whatever. I there was this mindset 40s, 50s, 60s. The nurses stood up in attention when the doctor came in the room. The doctor was the final authority. The
Yes.
family said, doctor, whatever you say. And then it started shifting away from that. But
Mm-hmm.
now I've seen this boomerang back, but instead of it being the doctors have the most education, now they have a God complex. And a lot of the mid-levels have a God complex. We know better. We should be
Mm-hmm.
making the decision. This patient should just shut up and take it. No, that is not what our oaths say. That is not what our profession is about. We have the skills to help that patient, to save that patient. But at the end of the day, that patient or their power of attorney gets to make the decision. And it is our job to respect that.
Mm-hmm. I could so clearly see that over the past 4 years of
Yeah.
definitely some doctors with what you're explaining were like that. And some doctors that I was like, you know what? If I was in the hospital, this is who I would want. Like,
We
because
always know that as the nurses.
yes, right? We
We
like,
always know
this is
that.
who I
Don't let
want.
them ever
Yes.
touch me.
Yes. Like, I
Yeah.
will AMA myself, come back
And
if
get
I would
somebody
ever,
else.
like, this is what I say. Who know, like,
Right.
this probably would never happen.
Right. Who
And
knows
I'm
when the
like,
last
because
thing happened,
I
right?
want this doctor. I want Dr. Kumar. That was one of my favorite doctors that I still talk to. Who
Right.
actually has a YouTube channel too, but he's out in California now. But I'm like, Dr. Kumar, he's who I wanted. He
Right.
looked at everything
Right.
holistically. He
Yes.
sat down
That's
at the
what is
patient's
needed.
bedside. He talked about diet. He's vegan, so I wouldn't agree with
That's
him
true
there on
physician.
some things, but
Right.
that's okay. Like, that's totally okay. And I remember having
Right.
patients hit their call bell and complain to me, like, they, Nurse Catherine, can you come into the room? Yeah, here I come. Come into the room, and they're like, that doctor told me to stop eating this. And I'm like, well, yes, because he's educating you. And like they
Right.
wanted me to
Right.
kind of like go along with them, but I'm like, no, actually, like, what he's telling you is the truth. And you shouldn't be drinking
Yeah.
Coke for breakfast, because that is like my one pet peeve I see, is that
Yeah.
people take their medicine
Yeah.
with Diet Coke in the morning, which is crazy to me. But rant over. But yes, there is definitely, of what you're saying, the two kinds of doctors, and I see that in nurses too, and I think you can see that in all practices, all medical
Yeah.
practices, of like, this is someone who is not listening, and this is someone who listens and actually wants to understand you or in the patient.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And a lot of that, that is learning to read the patients and to realize what you're dealing
Mm-hmm.
with. Some people are rational, some people are not. Some people are reasonable, some
Yeah,
people are not. Some people are educated, some are not.
that's
And
right.
you have to know how to meet them where they are and to try to obtain the best outcome while you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the reasons I've stayed in traditional medicine, even though a lot of it really frustrates me, is
Mm-hmm.
because there needs to be somebody who is willing to be that person that stands in the middle and goes, no.
That's right.
There
That's
needs to
right.
be somebody who's willing to stand there and go, the patient is the final decision, or
Mm-hmm.
that's not the best decision for the patient, or, have you considered X, Y, and Z?
Mm-hmm. I
Without just
applaud you for
going
that.
check,
That's
check,
not
check, check.
easy.
It's not, and it's a hard road to navigate, particularly in the last few years, as things have done um, a big change in the field, I would
Yes.
say,
Yeah.
and that goes back to what we talked about earlier about
Mm-hmm.
a few people with a lot of power making decisions, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody else having to get in line with it or not, and it has not led to the best outcome for our patients.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
a whole nother video or a whole nother
I
talk for a
know.
whole nother
I
day.
know.
I'm
We
going to
could
not
just
even
keep
start
going.
that one.
Yeah. We're
I'm not
already
even
at
start
over
that
an
one.
hour. Oh, I love it. I love
Wow.
it.
Were there other questions you wanted to ask before I into tangent?
Yes. The last one is just you've given so much advice to future NPers. Any last words of advice or wisdom that you would give to someone looking to become an NP?
Be willing to work hard. Be willing to study hard. Be willing to never stop learning. And it's
Mm,
not just our CME classes. Um, Critical thinking is very, very necessary for our job. But also, whatever your belief system is, you need to know that there's a higher power involved as well. Okay, for me, I fully believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that
mm,
we were made in the image of God. We are image bearers of God. And as such, that means that life is precious and that we have a responsibility to take care of those people with dignity and respect.
mm-hmm,
And, even if you are not a Christian, there you need to know that there is a higher power involved. And the bottom line is not you.
mm-hmm,
You are simply a player in the mix.
mm-hmm.
So that's part of what bothers me with the God complexes and people saying, well, if they don't follow what we want, then, we'll just pull them off the vent or we won't treat them or whatever. No, you don't have that authority. That authority
That's
is
right.
beyond you. Life and death is
That's
not in
right.
your hand.
That's right.
And
The Lord is
I had a
sovereign over
patient
our first breath and our last breath.
absolutely.
Unfortunately, the end of this video started getting a little wonky with some Wi-Fi issues, but that was the end of the conversation between Rachel and I. So Rachel, thank you so much for being on my channel and doing this interview and just educating my subscribers about and becoming an NP and how you have seen the medical world shift in the last decade and a half. Make sure to go check out some of my other interviews with other advanced nurses who have gone and furthered their degrees. You can find those on my channel. But other than that, that is it for today's video, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in next week's video.